He bought an abandoned warehouse to make money. Instead, he heard a tiny sewing machine in the dark. A 5-year-old girl stood alone fixing a torn toy with blue thread. One quiet moment pulled a billionaire into a promise that would change both their lives forever in the cold city. The November wind cut through downtown Chicago like broken glass, but Graham Vale barely noticed. At 36, he had trained himself not to feel unnecessary things, cold, regret, hesitation. His charcoal coat moved with him as he crossed the empty street toward the abandoned textile warehouse, a building most people had forgotten existed. To Graham, it wasn't forgotten. It was potential. Another dead space waiting to be revived, he thought, turning the heavy iron key in his palm. 5 years vacant. 0 emotional value. High return. That was the math that had built his fortune. The lock gave in with a dull metallic click. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old fabric. Sunlight slipped through grimy windows, cutting pale lines across the concrete floor. His footsteps echoed as he walked, already rearranging the space in his mind. Glass offices here, open work floors there. Progress always started with erasing what came before. Then he heard it. A sound too small for a building this large. Not footsteps, not dripping water. A soft, steady whir. Graham stopped. The sound came again, gentle and rhythmic, rising from somewhere below. He frowned. The building was supposed to be empty, secured, inspected, cleared. Liability tightened in his chest. He followed the sound to a narrow door half hidden behind stacked crates. The stairway beyond it descended into shadow. As he took the first step down, the whir paused. Silence. "Hello," Graham called, his voice low, controlled. No answer. Then very softly, a child's voice floated up from the darkness. "Don't move. I'm almost done." Graham's hand tightened on the railing. Whatever waited below it wasn't part of the plan. The basement was colder than the rest of the building, the air still and heavy with time. Graham's eyes adjusted slowly as he descended the final step. What he saw made him stop. A small folding table stood beneath a flickering lamp. Spools of thread, blue, white, pale yellow, were lined up with careful precision. Beside them sat a child-sized sewing machine, its edges worn smooth with use. And standing on a wooden crate was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Her dark hair was pulled back with a crooked elastic. She wore an oversized sweater, sleeves rolled twice past her wrists. In her hands was a torn, stuffed rabbit, its ear split open at the seam. The machine hummed as she guided the fabric through with intense focus. "Hold still," she whispered to the toy, her voice serious. "This part needs blue thread." Graham's heart dropped somewhere unfamiliar. He stepped back instinctively, lowering his posture, softening his presence the way one does around something fragile. "Hey there," he said gently. "Sweetheart, can you hear me?" The girl flinched. The machine stopped. She turned, eyes wide but not panicked, just startled. Storm gray eyes, sharp with confusion, studied him. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, not accusing. "Just stating a fact." Graham swallowed. "You're right, and neither are you." She hugged the rabbit to her chest. "I'm fixing him." "I see that," Graham replied. "You did a good job." Her shoulders relaxed just a little. "Did someone bring you here?" he asked carefully. She shook her head. "I came with my mom before, a long time ago. She worked here." "Where is your mom now?" Graham asked. The girl hesitated, then answered with quiet certainty. "At home. Resting. She gets tired a lot." Graham looked around the basement, the exposed wiring, the cold concrete, the unlocked door he'd just used. This wasn't fear he felt. It was something heavier. Responsibility. Graham crouched a few feet away, keeping his hands visible, his voice steady. "What's your name?" he asked. The girl shifted her weight on the crate. "Maisie." "That's a nice name," he said. "I'm Graham." Maisie glanced past him toward the stairs, then back to her rabbit. I'm not lost. I didn't think you were, Graham replied. But this building isn't safe for kids, especially when it's empty. Maisie frowned, processing this. It's quiet, she said. Quiet is safe. Not always, Graham thought, but he didn't say it. He stood slowly. How about we go upstairs together, okay? Somewhere warmer. Maisie clutched the rabbit tighter. I just needed the blue thread. We can find blue thread somewhere else, he said gently. She considered this, then nodded once. Graham offered his hand, stopping halfway so she could decide. After a moment, Maisie placed her small hand in his. It was cold. They climbed the stairs side by side. Graham let her set the pace. At the top, he draped his spare scarf around her shoulders without touching her skin. Thank you, she said softly. Outside, the wind picked up. Graham guided her to his car, buckled her in carefully, and turned the heater low. Where do you live, Maisie? He asked. She gave him an address on Sycamore Street. As he drove, he glanced at her in the mirror. She stared out the window, whispering to her rabbit. We're going home, she said. It's okay now. Graham didn't know why, but something in his chest cracked open. Because for the first time that day, the building no longer felt like an investment. It felt like a beginning. Sycamore Street felt like a different city. The buildings were smaller here, closer together, their paint faded but stubbornly intact. Chalk drawings lined the sidewalks, stars, hearts, crooked flowers, proof that childhood still fought to exist between cracked concrete and tired roofs. Graham parked in front of a pale yellow house with white shutters that had seen better years. Maisie unbuckled herself carefully, holding her stuffed rabbit like it was something fragile and alive. That's ours, she said. Graham walked her to the door and knocked, stepping back to give space. After a few seconds, the door opened slowly. The woman who stood there looked exhausted, not broken. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose knot. Her skin was pale, her posture careful, like someone rationing energy. Yes, she asked, voice guarded. Maisie's face lit up. Mommy. The woman's eyes widened. Maisie, she reached for her daughter, then froze when she noticed Graham. I'm Graham Vale, he said immediately. I found Maisie inside the old textile warehouse. She wasn't hurt. I brought her home. The woman's shoulders sagged with relief and fear all at once. She knelt, pulling Maisie into a gentle embrace. I told you not to go back there, she whispered, not scolding, just worried. I only needed blue thread, Maisie replied softly. Graham watched the exchange, the quiet rhythm between them. No chaos, no neglect, just exhaustion and love stretched thin. I'm Elena, the woman said, standing slowly. Thank you for bringing her home. Of course, Graham replied. The building wasn't properly secured. That's on me. I'll make sure it's sealed today. Elena hesitated, then nodded. I used to work there, years ago. Sewing design, before it closed. Something shifted in Graham's chest. As he turned to leave, a voice floated from next door. Oh my. Is everything all right? A woman with perfectly styled hair stood on the neighboring porch, smiling too quickly. I'm Vivian Crowley, she said warmly. I live right here. I keep an eye on the neighborhood. Graham met her gaze. Sometimes he thought eyes told you everything you needed to know. Vivian Crowley crossed the small patch of lawn with graceful ease, as if she'd rehearsed the timing. Her smile was polished, maternal, practiced. I didn't mean to intrude, she said. I just worry about children. You can never be too careful these days. Elena stiffened slightly, her hand tightening around Maisie's shoulder. We're fine, Elena said calmly. Vivian's eyes flicked to Graham. And you are Graham Vale, he replied. I own the warehouse. Oh. Vivian's brows lifted in pleasant surprise. Well, that explains things. Such a big place. So empty. She sighed softly. Children wander. Accidents happen. Maisie pressed closer to her mother. Graham kept his voice neutral. Maisie wasn't wandering. She was looking for sewing thread. I've already taken steps to secure the property. Vivian smiled wider, but something sharp hid behind it. That's good, because situations like this, she paused, they tend to attract attention. Elena's jaw tightened. What kind of attention? Vivian waved a dismissive hand. Oh, you know, services, paperwork, people asking questions. Graham felt the temperature drop, not in the air, but in the space between them. I appreciate concern, he said evenly, but there's no need to escalate something that's been handled responsibly. Vivian studied him, reassessing. Of course, she said lightly. I only want what's best for everyone. As Graham walked back to his car, he saw Vivian lean toward Elena, whispering something he couldn't hear. Elena nodded stiffly, closing the door soon after. That night, Graham stood in his penthouse, staring out at the city lights. He replayed Maisie's small voice. I'm not lost. His phone buzzed with a message from his property manager confirming the warehouse would be sealed and monitored by morning. Good. But it didn't quiet the feeling that something else had been set in motion. Not danger. Pressure, and pressure he knew could break things just as easily as force. Graham didn't sleep. Instead, he made a list, short, careful, deliberate. Groceries, warm blankets, a children's book, a sewing kit with rounded needles and soft fabric. Nothing excessive. Nothing that would feel like pity. He sent the package through a local clinic, no name attached. On Sycamore Street, Elena opened the door to find the delivery resting neatly on the porch. Inside, a note written in clean, simple handwriting read, "For Maisie. And for you. No expectations." Maisie knelt beside the box, pulling out the book first. It was about colors and patterns, how small pieces became something useful and beautiful. Her fingers traced the illustrations. Look, Mommy. Blue thread. Elena swallowed hard. Across the street, Vivian watched from behind lace curtains, her smile fading. Later that afternoon, Graham returned briefly to Sycamore Street, not to the house, but to the corner cafe. From his seat by the window, he saw Maisie on the front steps, wrapped in a sweater too big for her reading aloud to her rabbit. Elena sat nearby, eyes closed, resting. The scene was quiet, safe, and yet Graham noticed Vivian stepping outside, phone in hand, gaze fixed on the yellow house. That night, Graham received a text from Elena. Thank you. You didn't have to do that. He replied simply, I wanted to. Several minutes passed. Then another message appeared. She asked if you were coming back. Graham stared at the screen. He didn't answer right away, because some promises he was learning had weight, and once made, they changed everything. The days that followed moved quietly like cautious footsteps in a hallway at night. Graham kept his distance just as he had promised himself. No surprise visits, no hovering. He focused on work meetings, numbers, things that behaved when you asked them to. Still, his mind kept drifting back to Sycamore Street, to a 5-year-old girl who spoke as if the world had already asked too much of her. At the warehouse, crews sealed doors and reinforced windows. Safety signs went up. Cameras blinked to life. Graham watched from the edge of the floor as the last lock clicked into place. It felt necessary. It also felt like closing a door he hadn't meant to open. That afternoon, Elena received a call from the clinic. Routine follow-up, medication adjustments. The nurse asked about support at home. Elena answered honestly, We manage. When the call ended, she sat at the kitchen table longer than usual, staring at nothing. Maisie climbed into the chair beside her and placed the stuffed rabbit on the table between them. Are we in trouble? Maisie asked. Elena shook her head gently. No, sweetheart. Grown-ups just ask questions sometimes. Do they stop asking? Maisie pressed. Elena smiled, thin but reassuring. Eventually, across the street, Vivian Crowley watered her roses with deliberate slowness, eyes tracking every movement. She waved when Elena glanced up, her friendliness polished and persistent. That evening, Graham received an email from his legal team about the warehouse inspection. Everything compliant. No issues. Yet another message followed this one from the community liaison at the clinic. Elena Foster has limited support. She's doing well but could benefit from temporary assistance if needed. Graham read it twice. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he opened a drawer in his office and found an old photo he hadn't looked at in years. A younger version of himself stood in front of industrial sewing machines, smiling awkwardly beside coworkers he barely remembered. He noticed the thread spools in the background. Blue, white, yellow. Some questions he realized didn't disappear just because you ignored them. Graham returned to Sycamore Street on a gray afternoon, not to the Yellow House, but to the small community center 2 blocks away. He met with a volunteer coordinator, asked about after-school programs, meal deliveries, and temporary childcare options. Nothing intrusive, he said. Just support. The coordinator nodded. That's usually what families need most. When he stepped back outside, he saw Maisie on the sidewalk holding Elena's hand. They were moving slowly, Elena's steps careful. Maisie noticed Graham first. Her eyes widened, not with fear, but with surprise. She lifted her free hand and waved. Graham hesitated, then waved back. Elena followed her daughter's gaze and stopped. The moment stretched awkward, but not hostile. "Hi," Graham said as he approached. "I didn't want to interrupt." "You're not," Elena replied. She looked tired but calmer than before. "Maisie talks about you." "I do," Maisie said, suddenly shy. Elena smiled faintly. "She asks if the building is lonely now that it's locked." Graham considered the question. "I think it's resting," he said. "Like you said you needed to." Maisie nodded, satisfied. Vivian's front door opened behind them. "Well, isn't this nice?" she said, stepping out with perfect timing. "Community togetherness." Elena's shoulders stiffened. "We were just heading home," Elena said. Vivian tilted her head. "I was thinking of calling the city about organizing more support for families who might need extra eyes." Graham met her gaze. "There are already appropriate channels for that," he said evenly. "And they're being used." Vivian's smile didn't falter. "Of course. I only meant to help." Maisie tugged on Elena's hand. "Can we go now?" "Yes," Elena said immediately. As they walked away, Graham felt the space Vivian left behind, thin, sharp, intentional. Pressure again. That night, Elena found a note slipped under her door from the clinic, confirming approved meal deliveries and optional childcare support. Nothing alarming. Everything documented. She exhaled long and slow. Maisie curled beside her on the couch. "You're quiet," she said. Elena kissed her hair. "Just thinking." "Thinking is loud," Maisie replied thoughtfully. Elena smiled. Across the city, Graham stared at his phone, aware that whatever came next would require more than silence. The weather changed overnight. Wind rattled windows. Clouds rolled low over Chicago, pressing down like a held breath. By morning, the forecast warned of heavy rain and possible outages. Elena prepared carefully checked flashlights, charged her phone, set out candles. She moved slowly, conserving energy. Maisie watched, mirroring her seriousness. "Is the sky mad?" Maisie asked. "No," Elena said softly. "Just tired." As the rain began, Vivian stood on her porch, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice carried faintly through the wind, measured, concerned, rehearsed. "Yes, I'm just worried about the child. No, nothing dangerous. I just think it's worth noting." Elena closed the curtains. By evening, the storm intensified. Rain tapped hard against the roof. A small leak appeared in the corner of the living room. Elena placed a bowl beneath it, calm but strained. Maisie sat on the floor, lining up crayons by color. "Blue goes first," she decided. The power flickered once. Twice. Elena's phone buzzed, a call from the clinic. They suggested monitoring her symptoms closely. If anything worsened, she should come in. I'll be fine, Elena said. But thank you. After the call, she sank onto the couch, eyes closed. Maisie climbed up beside her, pressing close. I can be quiet, she promised. You don't have to, Elena replied, brushing her daughter's hair. Just stay near me. The power went out. Darkness filled the room, broken only by the sound of rain and distant thunder. Maisie's breath quickened. It's okay, Elena said, lighting a candle. See, still here. But as the hours passed, Elena's breathing grew shallow. She reached for her phone again, fingers trembling this time. Maisie, she said gently, I need to make a call. Maisie nodded, clutching her rabbit. I'll be brave. As the ambulance lights reflected briefly against the curtains, Elena knelt in front of her daughter. I'll be back, she said. You're safe. Maisie believed her. Across the city, Graham's phone rang, and the storm at last began to break. Graham's phone rang just after 9. He was standing in his penthouse kitchen, staring at a screen full of reports he hadn't actually read. Outside, rain streaked down the glass walls, the city blurred into silver lines. Mr. Vale, the voice on the line, was calm, professional. This is the community clinic on Sycamore Street. We've been trying to reach Elena Foster. She's been admitted for observation. Graham's chest tightened. Is she stable? Yes, the nurse replied. But she came in during the storm. There's one concern: we need a temporary approved adult to stay with her daughter tonight. Social services are coordinating, but I can be there, Graham said before thinking. He paused, then added carefully, if that's appropriate. There was a brief silence. You were listed as an emergency contact for support coordination, the nurse said. With a social worker present, yes, that would be appropriate. Graham grabbed his coat. The rain was relentless as he drove. Streets flooded at the edges. Wind pushed against the car like a living thing. He kept his hands steady on the wheel, repeating one thought over and over. Be calm. Be steady. Be worthy of trust. When he reached Sycamore Street, the yellow house sat dark, except for a single candle flickering in the front window. A woman stood on the porch with a clipboard. Tessa Ward, the assigned social worker. Her expression was firm but kind. Thank you for coming, she said. Maisie's inside. She's safe. Just shaken. Graham nodded. What do you need from me, patience? Tessa replied. And honesty. Inside the house smelled of rain and candle wax. Maisie sat curled on the couch, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. She looked up when Graham entered. You came, she said quietly. Yes, he replied, kneeling a few steps away. I said goodbye to the storm first. That earned the smallest smile. Tessa explained the plan clearly: temporary supervision, documented consent, regular check-ins. No surprises, no shortcuts. Maisie listened carefully, then asked the only question that mattered. Will Mommy know where I am? Yes, Graham said gently. And she knows you're safe. Maisie nodded, satisfied. Outside, thunder rolled farther away. For the first time that night, Graham felt the storm loosen its grip. Graham's penthouse had never hosted a child. The space was clean, controlled, almost echoing. As Maisie stepped inside, her small shoes made soft sounds on the polished floor. She held Graham's hand until she saw the blanket he'd laid out on the couch. Warm, simple, familiar. This is where I sit, she asked. If you want, he said. Or we can move it closer to the window. She considered. Closer to you. Graham swallowed and nodded. Tessa stayed long enough to ensure everything was settled. Paperwork signed, emergency numbers, visible routines explained. She spoke directly to Maisie, not over her. You're in charge of telling us if you need anything, Tessa said. Maisie took this seriously. Okay. When the door closed behind the social worker, the apartment grew quiet. Not empty, just still. Graham made soup the way his mother once had, slowly, carefully, tasting as he went. Maisie sat at the counter on a stool, swinging her feet. Mommy makes it thicker, she observed. I'm still learning, Graham admitted. She nodded. That's okay. They ate together. Not much conversation. Just enough. Later, Graham found a spare lamp and placed it near the couch. He handed Maisie a book, the one from the care package. She opened it immediately, tracing the pictures with her finger. My rabbit likes this page, she said, holding it up. I do too, Graham replied. When it was time to sleep, Maisie hesitated. Her voice dropped. Will you leave when I close my eyes? Graham sat on the floor beside her, keeping space but staying close. I'll be right here, he said. I'll stay awake a little longer. She studied his face, searching for something. Whatever she found there seemed to be enough. Okay, she whispered. As she drifted off, Graham watched the steady rise and fall of her breath. The storm outside faded into distant rain. He realized then that this wasn't rescue. It was presence. And presence, he understood, was heavier than any promise he'd ever made. Morning light crept slowly into the penthouse, pale and unsure. Graham was already awake. He sat at the dining table with his laptop closed, a cup of untouched coffee cooling beside him. He'd slept in short pieces, waking each time the building shifted or a car passed below. On the couch, Maisie stirred. Good morning, she said sleepily. Good morning, Graham replied. How did you sleep? She thought about it. The quiet was loud at first. Then it was soft. Graham smiled. That makes sense. They had breakfast toast with honey fruit cut into careful shapes. Maisie lined the pieces up before eating them, satisfied once the colors matched. The phone rang mid-morning. Graham answered immediately. Elena's awake, the nurse said. She's asking for Maisie. Relief washed through him, slow and steady. I'll bring her, Graham said, with approval. Of course. Before they left, Maisie tugged on his sleeve. You didn't leave, she said. No, Graham replied. I said I wouldn't. She nodded, storing the information somewhere important. At the hospital, Elena looked smaller against the white sheets, but her eyes were clear when Maisie climbed onto the chair beside her bed. Mommy, Maisie whispered. I'm here, Elena replied, voice thin but warm. I told you I'd come back. Graham stood back, giving space. Tessa joined them, documenting quietly, respectfully. Elena reached for Graham's hand. Thank you, she said, for doing this right. He nodded. We'll keep doing it right. As Maisie traced circles on her mother's hand, Graham felt a familiar unease return, an old memory pressing forward. Elena's eyes met his, and something unspoken passed between them. Recognition. Not fear. Not accusation. Just truth waiting patiently for the right moment. Outside the hospital window, clouds began to part. The storm was over. But the story was only just beginning. The hospital room settled into a quiet rhythm after the initial rush of relief. Machines hummed softly. Curtains stirred with the filtered daylight. Maisie sat cross-legged on the chair beside her mother, drawing careful shapes on a scrap of paper a nurse had given her. Elena watched her daughter with a look that held gratitude and grief at the same time. Graham stood near the window, hands folded, giving them space. He was still there when Elena finally spoke. She's always been like that, Elena said softly. Careful, observant, like she's listening for something other people don't hear. Graham turned. She notices details. Elena smiled faintly. She notices silence. The words landed heavier than Elena likely intended. Tessa Ward checked her notes and stepped out discreetly, leaving the room with permission and trust intact. The door closed gently behind her. Elena took a slow breath. Graham, there's something I should tell you. He didn't interrupt. I worked at the warehouse for nearly 6 years, Elena continued. Design support, repairs, teaching new hires. She hesitated. I left suddenly. Graham nodded. I saw the records. Her eyes lifted, surprised. You did, yes, he said. I wanted to understand the place. and what it meant to you. Elena studied him for a long moment, as if weighing the risk of truth against the cost of silence. I tried to contact you, she said finally. When I found out I was pregnant. The room felt smaller. You were transferred, she went on. Your office changed. No one could or would give me your new information. Graham closed his eyes briefly. The memory came back in sharp pieces, the promotion, the move, the urgency of becoming someone important. I didn't know, he said. I should have looked harder. Yes, Elena replied gently. But we were both different people then. Maisie looked up from her drawing. Mommy Elena smiled and brushed her daughter's hair back. I'm right here. Maisie nodded, reassured, and went back to coloring. Elena lowered her voice. I'm not telling you this to claim anything, or to ask for something. I don't want secrets growing where trust should be. Graham felt a strange ache behind his ribs. What do you want me to do? Elena met his gaze, steady and tired. Nothing you don't choose. That answer changed everything. They didn't speak of biology right away. Instead, they spoke of schedules, medication, kindergarten drop-off times, emergency contacts. Graham listened more than he talked, absorbing the shape of a life that existed entirely outside his own. Maisie finished her drawing and held it up. It's the house, she announced, and the window that doesn't close all the way. Elena smiled. You remembered. Because it whistles, Maisie said. When the wind is lonely. Graham crouched beside her. We can fix that, he said. She considered this. Okay. Later that afternoon, Tessa returned. Everything proceeded carefully, ethically, with consent and clarity. Elena asked the questions first. Tessa explained the process without pressure. If we decide to confirm paternity, Elena said it needs to be done cleanly. No confusion for her. Tessa nodded. That's exactly how we do it. Graham didn't push. He didn't suggest. He waited. That night, Elena asked Graham to walk with her in the hallway while a nurse sat with Maisie. I'm scared of what this could change, Elena admitted. Not of you, of the weight it might put on her. I won't tell her anything she's not ready to hear, Graham said, and I won't disappear. Elena searched his face. That's a promise. Yes, he replied, but not a binding one, a lived one. The test was approved, documented, transparent. While they waited, Graham focused on routine. He brought Maisie to the clinic's child-friendly playroom. He asked permission before every step. He kept his voice calm. One afternoon, Maisie asked him a question without looking up from her blocks. Are you going to be in my life story, she asked. Graham paused. If you want me to be. She stacked one more block carefully. Okay, that was all. The results arrived 3 days later. Tessa delivered them in person. Elena held the envelope but didn't open it right away. Maisie sat between them, swinging her legs. Is it a letter? Yes, Elena said. But it's a grown-up letter. Graham watched Elena open it, watched her eyes move across the page. She closed it quietly. Yes, she said simply. He's her father. Graham didn't breathe for a moment. Maisie looked from one adult to the other. What does that mean? Elena took her hands. It means you have more people who care about you. Maisie considered this carefully. More is okay, she decided. Elena's health declined slowly after that. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but enough to change the rhythm of their days. Doctors spoke honestly, kindly. Plans were adjusted, support increased. Maisie noticed everything. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the hospital window, Elena asked for them both to come closer. I need to say something important, she said. Maisie climbed onto the bed, carefully curling against her mother's side. Graham pulled a chair close, staying level with them. Elena, he began. She shook her head gently. Listen first. She turned to Maisie. You have always been very brave. But you don't have to be brave all the time anymore. Maisie frowned. Why? Because grown-ups are here, Elena said. Good ones? Maisie glanced at Graham. You mean him? Yes, Elena said. If you want. Graham felt his throat tighten. Elena reached for his hand. I don't want you to replace anything, she said. I want you to protect what already exists. I will, he replied without hesitation. Promise she keeps her routines, Elena continued. Her house, her stories, the way she remembers me. I promise, Graham said, all of it. Maisie pressed her rabbit against her chest. Mommy, she whispered, will you still know where I am? Elena smiled through tears. Everywhere you are. Later that night, after Maisie fell asleep in the hospital recliner, Elena spoke one last time. She shouldn't grow up too fast, Elena said. She already tried. Graham nodded. I'll slow the world down for her. Elena exhaled, long and peaceful. That's all I wanted. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, something settled into place. Not ownership, not rescue, but a promise made without chains and kept without conditions. The next week moved like soft fabric pulled through careful hands, steady quiet stitched together with routine so nothing frayed. Elena's doctors spoke in the kind of voices that didn't panic people. They adjusted medications, recommended rest, and encouraged short, calm visits. They made space for dignity. They made space for love. And Graham followed every instruction like it was sacred law. Maisie spent her mornings in the hospital's child-friendly playroom under staff supervision, coloring and building towers that leaned dramatically and then very proudly didn't fall. Graham stayed nearby, never hovering, always available. He learned how to ask questions without making the answers heavy. How do you feel right now? Do you want quiet or a story? Should we draw Mommy a picture? Maisie chose pictures most of the time. She drew the yellow house with the whistle window, the stuffed rabbit with the blue thread patch, and more recently, Graham as a tall stick figure, holding an umbrella big enough for everyone. Elena laughed when she saw that last one, a real laugh, warm and familiar. You made him a superhero, she teased. Maisie corrected her gently. Not superhero, umbrella. Graham's throat tightened, but he smiled. Umbrella is better. Tessa Ward came by often, never as a threat, always as structure. She explained things in age-appropriate ways using simple language and reassurance. She spoke directly to Maisie with calm respect. We're making sure you have a safe plan, Tessa said one afternoon. That means grown-ups agree on what happens next. No surprises. Maisie nodded solemnly. I don't like surprises, we know, Tessa replied softly. So we won't do them. Elena asked for a family meeting in a quiet room with soft lighting and a window that looked out at a courtyard garden. She insisted it not feel like a courtroom. No pressure, Elena told Tessa. No big words, Tessa smiled. That's my favorite kind of meeting. Graham sat across from Elena with paperwork on the table, but he didn't touch it until Elena did. That was his new rule, no control without consent. Elena's hands rested on a folder. Her voice stayed calm. I want temporary guardianship established properly, she said. And I want a long-term plan that keeps Maisie stable, school, home, visits, her routines. Graham nodded. Whatever you want documented, we'll document. Elena's gaze softened. And I want her to keep the yellow house in her story. Graham leaned forward slightly. I'll protect it. Tessa explained what was needed: signatures, a court filing, a scheduled hearing. Everything legal, everything transparent. Maisie sat beside Elena, feet swinging gently, listening like she was learning something important about the world. When Tessa asked if she had any questions, Maisie's small hand lifted. Do I get to bring my rabbit? She asked. Tessa smiled. Always. The day Elena asked for a quieter visit, the hospital room felt like a chapel made of ordinary things. A small lamp, a water cup, a stack of Maisie's drawings on the tray table like tiny prayers. Maisie climbed carefully onto the bed. Elena kissed her forehead. Thank you for being my brave girl, she whispered. Maisie frowned, serious. I'm not brave all day. Only sometimes. That's perfect, Elena said. Sometimes is enough. Graham sat in the chair near the bed, silent present, hands folded. Elena reached for him. He held her hand gently as if touch could be too loud. I need you to remember, Elena said, voice thin but clear. She doesn't need to be impressed. She needs to feel safe. I understand, Graham replied. Elena looked toward Maisie, who was now tracing the blue thread seam on her rabbit's ear. Tell him, Elena whispered. Maisie glanced up at Graham. Her eyes were steady. Don't make big promises, she said plainly. Just don't disappear. Graham didn't argue. He didn't perform. He nodded once like a vow. I won't, he said. Later, quietly, gently, with staff guidance and no chaos, Elena slipped into rest that became permanent. It was not described as pain. It was described as peace, dignity, a soft closing of a chapter. Tessa stayed. Graham stayed. And when Maisie asked, "Is Mommy resting now?" the answer was honest and tender. Yes, Graham said. Resting in a way that doesn't hurt anymore. Maisie hugged her rabbit, leaned into Graham's side, and whispered something so small it nearly vanished. Okay. And the world didn't end. It changed shape. Grief didn't arrive like thunder. It arrived like quiet air after a door closed, noticeable, heavier, but still breathable. Graham kept Maisie's routine steady. Morning light. Breakfast. A story. A short visit to the yellow house with Tessa present to collect comfort items and clothing with care. No rushing. No stripping a home bare like it never mattered. Maisie moved through her own living room, slowly touching familiar things with the seriousness of a child who understood that objects could hold memories. She picked up a small tin of buttons, shook it once, and listened to the soft clatter. Mommy liked these, she said. We'll keep them, Graham replied. She opened a drawer and found Elena's sewing thimble. She held it up. This is tiny. It's strong, Graham said. Maisie nodded, strong like her. Tessa wrote notes quietly at the kitchen table, documenting everything: the child's consent, the plan, the visits, the timeline. Graham respected the process because it protected Maisie from anyone turning her life into a tug-of-war. And that's exactly what Vivian Crowley wanted. Vivian appeared at the yellow house the second afternoon, dressed like sympathy was a costume black coat, neat scarf, eyes shining with practiced concern. Oh, sweet Maisie, she cooed from the walkway. I heard about your mother. Such a tragedy. Graham stepped between Vivian and the child without aggression, just position. A human boundary. Tessa Ward. Vivian said brightly, as if they were friends. I'm so glad you're here. I have observations that might help. Tessa's expression stayed polite and neutral. You're welcome to submit information through official channels, Ms. Crowley. Vivian sighed theatrically. I just worry. A wealthy stranger suddenly becomes involved and the children need familiarity. Graham didn't flinch at the word stranger. He let Tessa handle it first. That was the point of responsible adults, no ego battles in front of a child. We're following legal procedure, Tessa said evenly. Mr. Vale is cooperating fully. Vivian tilted her head, and the property, she asked, voice soft, like a casual question. This house is quite valuable now. Will it be sold? Abandoned. Maisie looked up sharply, clutching her rabbit. Graham kept his tone calm. This is still Maisie's home story, he said. No decisions will be made without court guidance and Tessa's supervision. Vivian's smile tightened. Of course. I only meant some families don't realize what they have. Sometimes an opportunity can help everyone. Tessa's pen paused. Opportunity for whom? Ms. Crowley. Vivian gave a delicate laugh. For the neighborhood. For development. For progress. Graham heard the same word he'd once worshipped: progress. and for the first time it sounded like something sharp enough to cut people. Tessa Graham said gently, "May I show you the file?" Vivian's eyes flickered. File Graham opened his briefcase and handed Tessa a folder. Not dramatized, not threatening, just documented reality, recorded calls to the county assessor, emails to a realtor, notes from neighbors about Vivian's repeated comments on property value and turnover. Tessa scanned the first page, then the second. Her expression didn't change, but the air did. Vivian's smile faltered. "I don't know what you think you're proving." "I'm not proving anything," Graham said calmly. "I'm protecting a child from confusion." Tessa closed the folder with deliberate care. "Ms. Crowley," she said, "any communication you have should now go through my office only. Please do not approach Maisie directly." Vivian's face flushed. "That's ridiculous. I've lived here for years, and Maisie has lived through enough change," Tessa replied. "We won't add pressure." Vivian's eyes darted to Maisie as if searching for a lever. Maisie didn't give her one. The little girl stepped closer to Graham and spoke with quiet clarity. "My mom said grown-ups don't take houses from kids," she said. Vivian's mouth opened, then closed. Graham knelt to Maisie's height. "You're right," he said softly. "And we won't let anyone do that." After Vivian left, heels clicking faster than before, Tessa exhaled. "You handled that appropriately," she told Graham. Graham nodded. "I'll keep handling it appropriately. Every time." And in Maisie's small hand, the stuffed rabbit stayed safe, patched ear-blue thread shining like a promise that held. The court hearing wasn't dramatic. It was calm, structured, and kind, exactly what a child needed. Tessa explained to Maisie what would happen in simple terms. A judge would listen, adults would agree on a plan, and Maisie would stay safe. Maisie asked, "Do judges like rabbits?" And Tessa answered, "The good ones do." On the morning of the hearing, Graham didn't wear a power suit. He wore something simple: navy jacket, clean shirt, no sharp edges. He wasn't trying to look important. He was trying to look steady. Maisie wore a soft beige sweater and held her rabbit like a tiny shield of comfort. Before they left, Graham brought her to the yellow house one more time, briefly supervised, to say goodbye in her own way. Not forever. Just for now. Maisie stood in the doorway and whispered, "I'm going to be little now," like she was practicing a new language. Graham crouched beside her. "That's exactly the plan," he said. At the courthouse, the hallway smelled like paper and coffee and patience. Tessa guided them through security, calmly explaining each step, so Maisie never felt surprised. Inside the courtroom, the judge spoke softly when addressing Maisie. Not baby talk. Respect. "Maisie," the judge said, "do you feel safe with Mr. Vale?" Maisie looked at Graham, then at Tessa, then back to the judge. "Yes," she said. "He stays." The judge nodded. "And do you understand that your mom loved you very much?" Maisie's chin lifted. "Yes," she told me with her eyes. A quiet pause filled the room, tender, not heavy. The judge reviewed the documents, Elena's wishes, the temporary guardianship plan, continued social worker oversight, therapy resources if needed, and the provision that Maisie's connection to her home and community would be maintained. When the judge looked at Graham, the question was simple and direct. "Mr. Vale, are you prepared to parent with humility and accountability?" Graham didn't hesitate. "Yes." "And are you prepared to honor Ms. Foster's legacy without using it for reputation or attention?" "Yes," Graham replied. "This is private, it's not a project." The judge nodded once satisfied. The decision granted temporary guardianship with clear terms and a path toward permanency. Again, no drama, just safety. Outside, Maisie took Graham's hand as if it had always been there. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we go home," Graham replied. "My home or your home?" Maisie asked. Graham answered carefully, remembering Elena's words. "Both," he said. "Your home story stays yours, and my home becomes a place you can rest." Later that week, Graham made two decisions that reshaped the future. First, he placed the yellow house into a protected trust, managed legally, so it couldn't be targeted or manipulated. It wasn't a trophy. It was a memory that deserved safety. Second, he paused the warehouse redevelopment and redesigned it into something Elena would recognize as honorable. The Elena Foster Studio, a community sewing and skills center with childcare tutoring support and job training partnerships. Everything lawful, safe, supervised. A place where parents could learn without fear and children could be children. On the first day of construction, Graham brought Maisie to the site only briefly with hard hats and a clear safety boundary. She stared at the wide space where she'd once stood on a crate beneath a flickering lamp. "It looks different," she whispered. "It will," Graham said, "but it won't forget." Maisie opened her backpack and pulled out a drawing. The warehouse turned bright and warm, with windows like sunshine. In the center was a rabbit with a blue patch. She handed it to Graham. "Put it on the wall." Graham took it with reverence. "I will." That night in the penthouse that no longer felt echoing. Graham read Maisie a story while she curled under a blanket that smelled like laundry and safety. As the city hummed outside, Maisie touched the rabbit's patched ear and asked in a small voice, "Does Mommy know we're okay?" Graham didn't rush the answer. He made it honest and gentle. "I think she does," he said, "and I think she'd be proud of you." Maisie's eyes fluttered closed. "Good," she whispered, "because I'm tired." Graham stayed until her breathing softened, and when the quiet came, it wasn't loud anymore. It was home. Spring arrived on Sycamore Street without ceremony. The trees budded slowly, sidewalks warmed, and across from the yellow house a for sale sign appeared in Vivian Crowley's yard, white, plain, unmistakable. No confrontation followed, no raised voices, no final argument. Vivian left the way she had lived, quietly repositioning herself when the ground stopped favoring her. The official notices had been clear. Boundaries had been set. Documentation spoke louder than charm ever could. Maisie noticed the sign one morning while eating cereal. "The watching lady is moving," she said. "Yes," Graham replied. "She found somewhere else to be." Maisie considered this. "That's okay," she decided. "Everyone needs a place." Graham smiled. That answer told him more about healing than any report ever could. The yellow house remained protected, legally secured, gently restored. The whistle window was fixed, but Graham asked the contractor to leave a tiny vent open. Why, the man asked. "So it can breathe," Graham said. Some things didn't need explanation. At the Elena Foster Studio, construction finished without spectacle. No banners, no press. Just a clean opening, careful safety checks, and a simple plaque near the entrance. This place was built with skill, care, and love. Maisie placed her drawing on the wall herself, taped straight, adjusted twice. "That's where it belongs," she said. Graham believed her. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Graham and Maisie sat on the porch of the yellow house. The neighborhood moved around them, doors opening, laughter, drifting, life continuing. Maisie leaned against his sidelight, uncertain. "Nothing is taking us," she said. Graham nodded. Nothing ever was. Life didn't become perfect. It became gentler. Maisie started kindergarten in a classroom painted with animals and numbers. She learned songs and finger painting, and how to ask for help without whispering first. Her teacher noted her focus, her kindness, the way she offered crayons to anyone who dropped one. Graham adjusted his work without drama. Fewer late nights, more mornings. Meetings moved. Priorities followed. At home, the penthouse transformed not into a child's fantasy, but into a place where a child fit. Corners softened. Noise became welcome. Maisie claimed one drawer in the kitchen for her coloring supplies and one shelf for her rabbit, who now had a small bed of his own. On quiet evenings, Graham cooked, while Maisie narrated from her stool. "Mommy would like this part," she said once, pointing to a simmering pot. Graham didn't correct her. At the studio, parents learned skills with dignity. Children played nearby, supervised safe. No rush, no pressure, just growth at a human pace. One afternoon, Maisie sat at a low table with a rounded needle carefully stitching a heart-shaped patch under guidance. For who, Graham asked. For the blanket, she said. The one that keeps everyone warm. He didn't ask more. Some answers didn't need words. That night, tucked into bed, Maisie asked her daily question. Will you tell Mommy about today? Yes, Graham said. Every detail. Maisie smiled, satisfied, and drifted to sleep. And for the first time since he could remember, Graham slept deeply, too. The final hearing came and went without tension. Paperwork signed, terms confirmed, support plans renewed, permanence established not as a headline, but as a promise kept. The judge spoke plainly. Maisie, you are safe, you are loved, and you will remain connected to your story. Maisie nodded seriously. I like my story. Outside the courthouse, there were no cameras, no applause, just sunlight and breathing space. That afternoon, Graham took Maisie to the yellow house one last time before dinner. They stood in the doorway together. Do we leave it? Maisie asked. No, Graham replied. We keep it. It's part of you. She touched the doorframe once, then turned away without fear. At home, Maisie climbed onto the couch with her rabbit and looked at Graham thoughtfully. Are we a family now? She asked. Graham answered the way Elena would have wanted, simple, honest. Yes, he said. We are. Maisie nodded, accepting it like a fact, not a miracle. Later, as Graham tucked her in, she whispered one last thing. I'm little, she said. Graham smiled, brushing her hair back gently. You get to be. Outside, the city lights shimmered, still busy, still chasing things. But inside that room, a different kind of wealth settled into place. Not owned, not announced, just lived. Forever. Did this story move your soul? Share your feelings in the comments and rate it from 1 to 10. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, then tap the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Click the end screen to watch another heartfelt video. See you in the next story.